All right, first we're gonna start off with tire fitment. Have you ever wondered how to read the tire size? It is kind of confusing, but it's fairly simple once you know kind of how it works. We're just gonna use one of our rears for here. So there's 3 numbers. The first number, 255. So this is a 255/35 ZR18. The Z is just kind of an extra rating. Don't worry about that right now. The first number, 255, that is the width of the tread in millimeters. That's a nice measurement to have, and it's easily readable. You can kind of take that width and you know what it is right off the bat. The second number, /35, is the tire sidewall height, but it's shown in an aspect ratio. So it is not a millimeter or anything like that. It's a percentage. So it's basically saying the sidewall height is 35% of 255 millimeters. Get your calculator out. Pretty simple, you can find out the sidewall height. The third number always has R, sometimes it has this Z, but we're not worried about that right now. R is just saying rim, and then it has 18 on this one, so this is for an 18-inch rim. That will always kind of tell you what rim size diameter it will fit, not necessarily the width. Tires are made in many different ways. The best thing to do is look up this specific tire and the size that you have, and then you can see the rim width recommendations. So it'll usually say, 7.5 to 8.5 inches, somewhere in there. So the next one is, what the heck is bulge? Not that kind of bulge, guys. Let's grow up a little bit. And what the heck is stretch? So this is a rear for our R32. So stretch versus bulge. This is actually a fairly square setup, but basically what we're talking about is, so that first number, how it fits on the rim width. So if you have a tread width that is smaller than the rim width, you're gonna get some sort of stretch. And so that's what we have here. This is a 255 on an 11-inch wide wheel. You can kind of mess with the width of the tire and width of the wheel and get the same stretch. This is like the maximum stretch I would ever recommend. So we've tested this at fairly low PSIs, like mid-teens, low teens, and it can get sketchy, especially in the wet, where they don't warm up enough. So I would never recommend running any more stretch than this for like a functional drift car. Over here, this is more of a square setup. So this is again a 255, but on a 9.5-inch wide wheel. Barely just a little bit of stretch, but not really. It's fairly square setup. You can run what we call bulge, and so that's actually getting a wider tread width than what the rim is, or what's recommended, and then you'll get kind of a sucked in effect, basically the opposite of this. Some people do prefer that, depending on what sport it is, and even in drifting, but we've had really good results with this square setup. So that's pretty much tire stretch and bulge. I would really recommend, going in between these two setups. Somewhere in there, you'll be more than solid. Next, we're gonna talk about the UTOG rating. Uniform Tire Quality Grading. So this was something that all the tire companies put together so that they'd have a uniform way to kind of grade the tires. There it is. It's based off of treadwear, traction, and temperature, which is temperature resistance. So starting with treadwear, basically the lower number, the grippier it is. But really what it is it's how long it will last. So they're not really thinking about racing or drifting. They're thinking about on a street car, kind of how many miles you're gonna get out of it. But generally, a lower treadwear number is a softer tire, which is gonna be grippier. It's not gonna last as long, but it's gonna be better for drifting. Treadwear can actually go as low as 100. These are 380, which is actually a decently high treadwear. But the interesting thing that happens with the UTOG rating, like we've tried 200 treadwear tires where these were actually grippier. So it's not made for racing or drifting, and how hot they get as well as when they wear down, everything starts changing. So it does take some kind of testing and messing around, and we're actually gonna give you some good brands we recommend, so stay tuned on that. So traction is the next one. Traction is a test they do. It's basically how fast it will stop in the wet. Kind of different than what we're doing with drifting, but essentially here, the higher letter the better. It goes C, B, A, AA. We're looking for the highest letter grade. These are A. Again, these are great though for a practice tire, and we will talk about that. So temperature resistance is basically how hot this tire can get before it starts falling apart. Drifting, I would always run an A tire. That's basically gonna always put you in a summer tire range, especially when we're looking at like a traction and below a 400 treadwear. So the next one is these two numbers with a letter. It always comes after the tire size. This is your tire weight and speed rating. We're not really concerned with this, believe it or not. When we go for the UTOG rating and the size that we want, we're automatically put in a summer tire or performance category. And so this is always gonna be a fast enough tire and good enough weight. So I really wouldn't worry about that. If you do find a tire size though that fits and the treadwear's there, and for some reason this is like a really low number or basically a higher letter in the alphabet, maybe double check it because it's not gonna work very well. But generally you're gonna be fine, and this is just gonna be where you want it. So not a huge concern. All right, so now we're at the point, why is grip important? There's a common myth. We actually did a top 10 myths video if you guys wanna check that out about drifting. And one of the biggest ones I find talking to people, even people that are getting into drifting, but I'd say especially people that don't know too much about it, is they think, oh, you just want your car set up super loose, kind of like you're in the rain or on ice or something like that. As fun as that is, that's actually not true. We do want grip, especially with like our pro cars and the higher horsepower cars. The rear end is actually set up more similar to a drag car. So grip is very critical, and a great way to get it is with your tires. With something around like 400 to 500 horsepower, something that will work fairly well, which we're gonna go into. Really at any horsepower rating, in my opinion at least, we always want a lot of grip. So we're always looking for more of a racing tire. So a summer performance tire is really not gonna do us very well, even on a low horsepower car. Setting that car up that we can still carry speed, and thus we need grip in the front so we can hold that line in the drift, as well as be able to brake well and things like that. So this is a front wheel and tire setup from our R32, which has Wise Fab on it. But this is gonna be a similar setup you would use on like a Part Shop Max kit, or even just a modded knuckle and extended lower control arm. The only difference is the wheel fitment. This is it's not a very aggressive fitment, right? Because the suspension's moved out so far. So the only difference with like a more simple angle kit is you would get to have a little bit more aggressive offset and more lip. The general like width and tire is similar. So this guy is a 235/40 R18. We found that this is a great tire size for that weight of car, and really at like any power level, even at 900 horsepower power level, this is a great tire as well. On our pro car, we actually run a 255 in the front. We prefer the Achilles 123S, but they don't make a tire that fits, like a skinny tire that fits in the front with the suspension. So we would run this 235 if we could, but we run a 255. But somewhere in that 225 to 255 front is gonna be fairly universal, and then you can just go whether it's 16, 17, 18 inch, and then figure out the offset and all that kind of crap and corruption. But in the front, get something like an Achilles 123S. Just get something grippy for the front, guys. Stop messing around. It'll change your life. As I said, the front is pretty simple. Just get something grippy. The rear is where it gets a little bit more interesting. In my opinion, it's not that confusing. We're gonna show you why. So if we're going for basically any kind of street car, practice car, drift missile, even a Pro-Am car on some levels, basically anything but like a high horsepower pro level car, we're gonna wanna go with something like this. So this here is an Ironman iMove Gen 2. This is basically just a summer or performance tire. This is a 255. So what's interesting here is these tires are super cheap. You're gonna go through a lot of tires, especially as you up your horsepower. And so you wanna find something that's cheap. That's honestly our first goal. Find something that is available and cheap. From there, we kind of look for something that's just gonna work. So we went fairly wide. Our car has 500 horsepower, so this has done really well for us. We do sometimes get into the teens tire pressure, but generally we're around 20 PSI. Speaking of, if you guys want us to go in more on tire pressures, let us know. Comment below. I think we could group that along with like suspension setup and alignment and things like that. So I've tested honestly a lot of these tires. For me, the best results I've had are Ironman, Delenti DH2, and then the Non-King. Non-King is a little bit harder to find now. Delentis are actually my #1 right now, but we couldn't find those. Again, these tires are they're weird. They're just Chinese tires, and sometimes they're hard to find. So the Ironman is also a great choice. We have Acceleras on this. I don't want to trash on Accelera. This tire is not anything close to the Ironman or the Non-King or the Delenti. I know they make some great higher grip tires, but we found these really started to kind of fall apart at higher temp, and that's something we don't want. Whereas these tires, we're able to run them smooth, just like the Pro Car tires and grippier tires, where they hold the construction together. And so that's gonna allow you to get a lot more value out of your tire and get kind of those extra 4 or 5 laps. Whereas tires like these, they kind of fall apart on us. The reason we have these, we couldn't find any other options. So sometimes you get in that situation and it happens. I would say Ironman, Delenti, Non-King, you're good to go. Now, if we get into like a high horsepower competition car, so this would be like Pro-Am, you know, Formula Drift and beyond. With this, we're actually running same tire as the front, just wider. So this is a 255/35 R18 Achilles 123S for Formula Drift. These are like the grippiest tires made, hands down. So we freaking love these tires. These really aren't necessary though, like just as kind of a little background, when I first got into drifting, I don't remember who I talked to, but they were like, grip is super important. So I'm glad I learned that little tidbit early on, but I took it to the extreme. I went out and bought like Toyo R888s, 8 of them for my drift missile, and we couldn't even get it to drift. So these tires are super gnarly. They're really unnecessary. Like the only reason we would ever run a tire like this on that car is if we had to use this as our backup car for Formula Drift. But really, we're able to keep up with even pro level cars on these tires in most situations. I wouldn't worry about these tires for the rear yet, and these are gonna cost you a lot more. You're gonna be able to spend way less money on these type of tires, spend your money where it counts, you know? So that's pretty much tires in a nutshell, guys. If you guys have any comments or questions, for real, hit us up. Comment on this video, DM us on Instagram, email us. We answer everything ourselves. I answer everything. I run all the social media. And then you'll see Jameson, who's behind the camera right now. He's always on there answering questions as well. So use this as a resource. I hope this video helped. Some more info on tire pressures and things like that, let us know. Please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it.